Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. What's up? I missed you guys. And today I've got a topic for you. A topic that won't just make your head spin 180 degrees, it'll literally blow your mind. It's weird, exciting, and full of mysteries. A story about American history, and world history too, that you won't find in the traditional history books the New World Order wants you to believe. Get your popcorn ready, sit tight, and let's uncover the truth. Can you believe this, fam? A U.S. Supreme Court ruling is forcing the Smithsonian Institution, the biggest research and museum complex in the world, by the way, to release secret papers from the early 20th century. What do these papers prove? They prove that this organization was involved in a massive historical cover-up, a cover-up that destroyed evidence showing the discovery of tens of thousands of giant human skeletal remains all across America. What does that mean? It means there were actual giants walking this earth. And top officials ordered this evidence destroyed to protect the dominant chronology of human evolution at the time, according to the court ruling. Holy moly! Now, check out this verse from Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. This isn't just a coincidence, folks. An organization called the American Institute of Alternative Archaeology sued the Smithsonian, accusing them of destroying thousands of giant human remains in the early 20th century. The Smithsonian fired back, accusing them of defamation and trying to damage their 168-year-old reputation. But what happened in court? Surprise! Several whistleblowers from inside the Smithsonian itself admitted to the existence of documents claiming to prove the destruction of tens of thousands of human skeletons ranging from 6 to 12 feet tall. That's like almost 2 meters to over 3.5 meters, guys. Can you imagine? And James Churchward, the AAIA spokesperson, said something that'll make your jaw drop. There has been a major cover-up by Western archaeological institutions since the early 20th century to make us believe that America was first colonized by Asian peoples who migrated across the Bering Strait 15,000 years ago, while in reality, there are hundreds of thousands of burial mounds across America that Native Americans claim were there long before them and show traces of a highly developed civilization, complex use of metal alloys, where remains of giant human skeletons are frequently found but not reported in the media and news. The turning point in this case was when a 1.3 meter over 4 foot human thigh bone was presented as evidence in court, proving the existence of such giant human bones. This hit the Smithsonian's lawyers like a ton of bricks because this bone was stolen from the Smithsonian itself by one of its high-ranking curators in the mid-1930s. This guy kept the bone his whole life, and on his deathbed, he confessed in writing about the Smithsonian's secret operations. He wrote in the letter, "It's awful what's being done to the American people. The New World Order, NWO, has been concealing the truth about humanity's ancestors, our ancestors, the giants who roamed the earth as mentioned in the Bible and ancient texts of the world, by destroying evidence. Guys, there's actually a conspiracy, a huge conspiracy." Excavators in the city of Lost City in Nevada are finding 7-foot, about 2.13 meters, skeletons. The top 10 giant discoveries in North America. Romanian giant legends. Listen up, folks. Depending on the region in Romania where the legends come from, there are different names for these giants. In the Buzăloi region, these giants are known as Tartari. And here's where it all connects. In Skăyen, in the Buzăloi Mountains, they found a bunch of unusually tall skeletons. For example, when locals tried to plant apple trees on a hill, they accidentally discovered human skeletons over 2.4 meters, about 8.2 feet, tall, right next to pottery fragments on the horizon of Buzăloi Mountain. Knowing the local legends, these folks immediately thought of the Tartari. One of these legends even claims that the mountain formation known as Stalpi Tainite, the Tainita Pillars, was built by these ancient giants. And in the past, these giants were also credited with building 2 huge underground halls somewhere under the mountain. The strange formation you can see on Mount Tainita looks like a bunch of stone chairs. And since they're at high altitudes and in a hard-to-reach area, the locals say the Tartari built these chairs to sit on when they wanted to hold council. Guys, this is big. Another legend from the Hatseg country, Sara Hatsegulu, tells the story of 2 giantesses who built 2 cities, one in Deva and the other on top of Mount Retezat. When the giantess from Deva finished building and saw her rival city had become more beautiful, she got jealous. In a fit of rage, she threw a plow towards the mountain castle and destroyed it, splitting the mountaintop at the same time. And that's how the mountain got its name, becoming known ever since as the Severed Mountain. And get this, they made a lot of archaeological discoveries in Giurgiu. Between 1940 and 1950, archaeologists found 80 human skeletons that looked like giants. These massive skeletons were about 4 to 5 meters, about 13 to 16 feet tall. They also found giant skeletons in other parts of the country. For example, in October 1989, they found 20 giant skeletons in Pantelimon, Lepata. The Arizona Silver Belt newspaper, on November 16, 1895, wrote under the headline, "Prehistoric Giants of Egypt." In 1881, when Professor Timmerman was exploring the ruins of an ancient temple to the goddess Isis on the banks of the Nile, 16 miles below Nagar Jafard, he opened a row of tombs where some prehistoric giant races were buried. The smallest skeleton among about 60 examined during Timmerman's excavation in Nagar Jafard was 7 feet 8 inches tall, and the largest was 11 feet 1 inch. A large number of commemorative tablets were discovered, but there was no record to suggest they were even in memory of men of unusual size. A cemetery called Wadi al-Jamus, meaning Road of the Water Buffalo, and a nearby pyramid have been excavated by archaeologists from Brigham Young University over the past 30 years. Many of the mummies discovered date back to the period when the Roman or Byzantine Empire ruled Egypt, from the 1st to the 7th century AD. Project director Carrie Mulestein, an associate professor in BYU's Ancient Scripture Department, said in a paper presented at the Society for the Study of Egyptian Antiquities Symposium in November 2014 in Toronto, "We're fairly certain there are over 1 million burials within the cemetery. It's big and dense." However, it's now believed, as of 2017, that it's more likely tens of thousands of graves. One of the discoveries that was never officially published was of a mummy over 7 feet, 2 meters tall. "We once found a male over 7 feet who was too tall to fit in the excavation shaft, so they bent him in half and threw him in." Can you imagine, guys, how they treat our history and these artifacts? This is a systematic destruction of antiquities. Giants' entrances and giant books. The giant Underwood typewriter displayed at the Palace of Liberal Arts operated using a regular-sized typewriter. Were giant animals and humans petrified in place by the New World Order? Giant Normandy, France. From The History of Science Fiction, The Age of the 13th Century, we learn that at the end of the 18th century, a great war began between Romanov Russia and Siberian Muscovy. At first, the Ottoman Empire joined as an ally of Tobolsk. The Romanovs found themselves in a difficult position. They had to fight on 2 fronts at once. However, on July 10, 1774, after a series of defeats, Turkey signed the Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca peace treaty with the Romanovs, signaling their defeat. By doing so, Turkey betrayed its ally, the Tsar of Tobolsk. The Romanovs seized this opportunity in 1774 and quickly mobilized their forces from the Turkish front to the Eastern Front. At the head of these forces was A.V. Suvorov, who had recently distinguished himself in battles against the Turks. With Suvorov's help, Count P.Y. Panin, the commander-in-chief of the Eastern Front, defeated the Siberian army of Pugachev. Suvorov personally escorted the captured Pugachev from Yaik to Simbirsk. He was later brought to Moscow and executed there, after they claimed he was just a regular Cossack who rebelled against the legitimate rulers, the Romanovs. But here's the mystery. It's more likely he was actually just a regular Cossack brought for execution, not the real Siberian war leader. His name might have really been Pugachev, but it's more likely the Romanovs concealed the true identity of the Siberian leader. The two secret committees established in Kazan and Orenburg in 1773-1774 were responsible for misleading the history of the Pugachev War, which in the article is called Pugachevshchina. Guys, this isn't just regular history, this is historical falsification. Most likely, folks, after their defeat, the remnants of the Tobolsk royal court and its loyal forces fled to China, where they were warmly welcomed by the Manchu emperors, who were distant relatives of the Tobolsk horde Tartars, see our book Bagaya Orda. The Romanovs occupied Siberia, initially annexing it to the Kazan province and pretending it had always been that way. But soon they began to divide it, after suddenly realizing it was too big. Many ancient Siberian cities were wiped off the face of the earth. Most names on 18th century Siberian maps no longer existed in the 19th century. When archaeologists discovered the remains of these destroyed Siberian cities in the 18th century, instead of reconstructing the true history of Siberia, they declared their discoveries to be very ancient. The perfect example of this is Arkheim in the Ural Mountains. This is a systematic destruction of an entire civilization. In 1775, Suvorov received a diamond-encrusted sword, the most luxurious and expensive award he ever got, commemorating the victory over Moscow-Tartary. Fortunately, it wasn't kept a secret at the time. The Romanovs happily celebrated their victory over their powerful Siberian neighbors. The victory over the Romanovs came at a cost, and they spared no expense or rewards for their victorious leaders. However, later came the time when they had to provide a narrative of the Tartary War on paper to document their version for future generations. And here they faced a difficulty. Since the Romanovs were constantly hiding the existence of their Siberian neighbors, portraying Siberia as always belonging to them, they decided to present the war with Tobolsk as a relatively easy battle between government forces and a rebel mob. And they claimed that the leader of these rebels was a common Cossack named Yemelyan Pugachev. When the story was presented this way, Suvorov's achievements in defeating Pugachev became an obstacle. It was clear that a great military commander shouldn't be fighting an ignorant peasant mob. He had much bigger tasks, and suppressing peasant revolts was the responsibility of second-tier military commanders. That's why they presented it this way. They claimed Pugachev was defeated by an unknown major named Mikkelsen, who was promoted to colonel for his achievement. And they said Suvorov had nothing to do with it. He was supposedly called to the Eastern Front by mistake, due to P.Y. Panin's panic. They said Suvorov had no business there at all. And so, in the end, Pugachev never fought. Can you imagine the scale of this fabrication? This is history completely fabricated to serve the agenda of the New World Order. During the reign of Peter I, relations between Romanov Russia and the vast Moscow Tartary became particularly strained. Fearing the restoration of the horde system in central Russia, the Romanovs moved their capital to distant St. Petersburg, which Peter I built specifically for this purpose. As for the former capital, Moscow, which many people still associated with the horde in the 14th and 16th centuries, it was assigned the role of a second-class city. Peter I and his circle didn't like Moscow and everything connected with it. Now listen to this detail recounted by the French writer Lepoix. He accompanied Peter's court in Paris in 1717. In his report to the French king, Lepoix wrote, "The word Muscovy and even Muscovia are extremely offensive to this entire court. It's clear that a severe political gloom would descend upon Moscow and the Moscow Kremlin. This is the exact picture that emerges from 18th century documents. The Romanovs not only abandoned the old Russian horde Moscow Kremlin in Jerusalem, but they also decided to ridicule it as Mongol artifacts. For example, they sent their jesters with their weddings to the Palace of Facets, Granovitaya Palata. They said, let them enjoy themselves. Let's see how the Romanov jesters and their friends danced, celebrated, and mocked in the heart of the former capital of Russia horde, biblical Israel. Ancient documents, which came to light after a long period of obscurity thanks to Zabilin's efforts, tell us The head of the Latin schools and teacher of philosophy, hero monk Joseph, arranged an organized theatrical performance. It is probable that during the arrangement of this comedy there, the wall paintings of the palace, which were already completely deteriorated, were whitewashed. Everything is clear. The Western European scholars who flowed through Romanov Russia, especially after Peter opened a window to enlightened Europe, which everyone admired many times, not only mocked in the Russian horde cathedrals, but also destroyed weak ancient horde monuments, enjoying impunity. In particular, they whitewashed the old frescoes. And later, after it was too late, they declared them too deteriorated. They claimed there was nothing left to do but whitewash them, and the place became clean and beautiful. The old Russian images stopped bothering the delicate Latin taste. It's strange that the Romanovs misused the Moscow Kremlin until the beginning of the 19th century inclusive. And from this, one can see how great their anger was at the previous horde traditions and memories associated with Moscow and its Kremlin. It reached a point where the Romanov administration at the beginning of the 19th century practically offered the Kremlin to thieves and fraudsters. In the Kremlin, dens of thieves and houses of debauchery appeared. This is the biggest proof of an attempt to erase and hide the Muslim Tartaria civilization. Guys, all the history we know might be fabricated. Communism was a curse invented by the Jesuits through their reduction settlements in South America. They chose Karl Marx, the German Jew, to be their puppet while he was under their care in Trier. They used communism to wage war against their hated enemies, the Romanovs, who expelled the Jesuits in 1820. And they chose a Jesuit priest named Iosif Vissarionovich Djugashvili from Georgia to turn Russia into a totalitarian nightmare. And this guy later changed his name to Joseph Stalin. These guys skillfully played the Russians and Americans against each other ever since, literally profiting from the bloodshed that ensued. They used their infiltrators and saboteurs in America to counter the technological developments introduced by the Nazis and led self-destructive policies, like when Kennedy threatened to resolve Vietnam and was eliminated. The Soviet Union collapsed, but instead of allowing a new climate of peace and cooperation to emerge, a massive rift was sown. They used organizations like the European Union and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, to escalate the containment strategy dreamed up by papal agents like Zbigniew Brzezinski, whom Russian intelligence believes was behind the election of Polish Cardinal Karol Józef Wojtyła to the papacy to become Pope John Paul II. A real crusade is still ongoing, targeting Orthodox Russia on its doorstep, using CIA, Nazi, Catholic influence in Slavic Ukraine, the birthplace of both nations. The Orthodox Church is heavily infiltrated by the Jesuits and is the left leg of the terrifying statue the prophet Daniel saw in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, with Rome being the right leg. And it's almost equally crippled by humanistic and pagan religious traditions as Rome. But through it, something great happened. The good Russian people still live their Christian values, and this doesn't please the satanic elite who run and rule the West via the Vatican. Serious stuff, guys. Robert K. Massey, in his award-winning book Nicholas and Alexandra, described the city of St. Petersburg at the turn of the century. It was the center of everything advanced, everything clever, and much that was cynical in Russian life. Great opera and ballet companies, symphony orchestras, and musical ensembles performed the works of Glinka, Rimsky-Korsakov, Borodin, Mussorgsky, and Tchaikovsky. And its citizens read Pushkin, Gogol, Dostoevsky, Turgenev, and Tolstoy. But society spoke French, not Russian, and the best clothes and furniture were ordered from Paris. The season in St. Petersburg began on New Year's Day and lasted until the beginning of Lent. Now, the story of the Seven Sisters, also known as Stalin's skyscrapers, is a group of 7 skyscrapers in Moscow designed in the Stalinist style. They were built from 1947 to 1953 in a really complex blend of Gothic, Baroque, and Russian styles. These towers were inspired by the Manhattan Municipal Building. At the time of construction, these buildings were the tallest in Europe, and the main building of Moscow State University remained the tallest building in Europe until 1997. The country of Bulgaria has a lesser-known relative hidden in the remote areas of the Autonomous Republic of Tatarstan, Bulgar. And while it might not be as famous, Bulgar is no less historically glorious. It's one of Russia's oldest cities. Long before the Mongols, the Eurasian steppes were controlled by another great Turkic empire, the early Bulgars, whose state was centered around the Sea of Ov, modern-day Russia and Ukraine. They were known for their state-building skills as much as their prowess in warfare, and they built massive stone fortresses wherever they settled. Under the legendary Khan Kubrat, the empire of the early Bulgars covered a large part of the Black Sea coast. After Kubrat's death, his 5 sons decided to separate, each going in a different direction to manage his own state. The most successful were Asparuk, who founded Bulgaria as we know it today, and Kotrag, who wandered north along the Volga River. The revival on the Volga River. In the end, Kotrag's Bulgars settled in a beautiful real estate area along the Volga River and founded the great city of Bulgar, a true Eurasian city. After a few campaigns against their neighbors, the Volga Bulgars, as they came to be called, established a vast empire in the heart of Russia. In 922, the ruler Aidar Khan converted to Islam and invested in building schools and mosques. At the same time, his state became a major intermediary along the Silk Road trade routes. Tombstones bear witness to a large Jewish and Armenian quarter, and travelers like Ibn Fadlan praised the Khan's focus on education. Bulgar became the center of Islamic civilization in Eastern Europe. And even after overcoming the Mongol and Russian eras, Bulgar remains an important site within Russia. The city, located on a quiet bend of the Volga River, contains the remains of stone fortresses, mosques, and tombs that bear witness to the existence of a powerful state skilled in the art of stone building. These remains of Volga Bulgaria are considered the origin of all Muslims living along the Volga River today, especially the Tatars and Bashkirs. They visit it once a year on a religious pilgrimage known as the Small Hajj. To this day, many Tatars consider themselves first and foremost Bulgars. Bulgar isn't just a regional monument, it's an official UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized as an integral part of the history of the entire Russian nation. In fact, Bulgar was the very first protected heritage site in all of Russia. In July 1722, Peter the Great himself ordered the governor of Tatarstan to renovate the site. There was the Winter Palace and the Kremlin or Novgorod, and there was Bulgar, the home of a mysterious civilization that once dominated Eastern Europe. Is the picture starting to get clearer, folks? Moscow, the White City, and the mysterious fires. Moscow is known for being a city of white stone, thanks to the first Kremlin walls being built from local limestone. But throughout its history, the Russian capital, which was mostly wooden, was shaped by fires, suffering dozens of large blazes. The Great Fire of 1547 that killed several thousand people, a fire started by invading Crimean Tatars in 1571 that killed tens of thousands, and a fire in 1737 that severely damaged the Kremlin. The last major fire in Moscow swept through the city during its occupation by Napoleon's Grand Army in September 1812. The fire destroyed 3/4 of the city's buildings, according to some estimates, and killed thousands of inhabitants and wounded soldiers. The fire had a lasting impact on the city's appearance, as city planners later rebuilt entire neighborhoods, creating new squares and reducing wooden construction. When the French entered Moscow, they found a city suddenly drained of life, like a desert, as de Caulaincourt recalled. In the Kremlin, just as in most private palaces, everything was in its place. The clocks were still ticking, as if their owners were still at home, he wrote. The fire spread rapidly from the outskirts of the city to the center, reaching homes near the Kremlin the next morning. The wind, which shifted slightly to the west, carried huge embers more than 200 meters into the air to fall like fiery rain and ignite new homes, as de Caulaincourt recalled. The air glowed with heat. While observing the disaster, Napoleon was said to have cried out, "What a terrible spectacle! They are burning it themselves! What a decision! What a people! These are the Scythians!" Didomé wrote, The burning city reminded me of the fires that destroyed parts of Constantinople and Smyrna before my eyes, but this time the scene was more spectacular. It was the most awful sight I had ever seen in my life. Guys, are all these fires just coincidences, or were they systematically used to erase the traces of an entire civilization? Is this part of the New World Order's plan to destroy any evidence of a previous advanced civilization, especially if it was an Islamic one, like the Muslim Tartaria civilization? This really needs some deep thinking. So, that's the end of our strange and exciting story, folks. A story that really makes us ask, is everything we've been told the complete truth, or is there something much bigger we were never supposed to know? In my opinion, there's definitely something more to it, and the stories we're told about history sometimes contain far more secrets and mysteries than we imagine. Is the history we know just a modified version? And was a great civilization like Muslim Tartaria deliberately erased from collective memory by the New World Order?
What do you guys think? Are you convinced by this? Or do you still have questions swirling in your minds? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already to see our upcoming videos that will blow your minds. See you in a new video, and peace out!